They called her Amina, daughter of a king, sister to a ruler, heir to a throne she was never expected to inherit. Before the world knew her name, before the legends turned her into myth, before songs carried her memory through centuries, Amina was simply a girl born into the royal palace of Zazzau, one of the powerful Hausa city-states of West Africa. But even as a child, people whispered that she walked with the confidence of someone destined for far more than a noble life. They said that when she stood still, the ground seemed to wait for her next step, and when she spoke, the elders paused, sensing a strange fire behind her words. No one knew that fire would one day set an entire kingdom ablaze. Zazzau in the 1500s was not a quiet kingdom. It was a thriving center of trade, metalwork, horse breeding, and military strategy. The Hausa people who lived there were skilled merchants and fierce warriors, and the walls of the city echoed with stories of past battles and future ambitions. Caravans passed through daily, carrying salt, gold, leather, and warriors for hire who boasted of distant lands. The city thrived, but danger always stood at its borders: rival states, raiders, and the shifting alliances that shaped the region. In this world of political intrigue and military power, Amina grew, listened, and learned. She was not like other children in the palace. While other girls learned courtly manners, embroidery, songs, and diplomacy, Amina spent her afternoons sneaking into the training grounds where royal guards practiced their sword drills and horseback skills. At first they shooed her away, laughing at the stubborn princess who refused to act proper. But Amina persisted, and when one of the younger guards challenged her to lift a small spear, more as a joke than a test, she raised it with both hands and held it steady until the laughter stopped. From that moment, she became impossible to ignore. By the age of 10, Amina trained daily with the palace guards. Her mother, Queen Bakwa Tirunku, who ruled Zazzau at the time, saw her daughter's unusual determination. Some queens might have discouraged it, fearing the dangers of war, but Bakwa allowed it. She knew that Zazzau needed strength, not just strength of armies, but strength of legacy. Amina's brother, Karama, would one day become king. Amina, she suspected, would become something else entirely. As Amina grew into her teenage years, she became a master horse rider, commanding her steed with an elegance and precision that startled even the most seasoned cavalry commanders. She could mount a horse in a single leap. She could fire arrows at full gallop, and by the time she was 16, she could defeat many adult soldiers in mock duels. Her reputation spread beyond the palace walls. Merchants spoke of her during trade journeys. Travelers carried stories of a fierce young princess whose hands were as steady as her gaze. But power does not rise without resistance. Some nobles whispered that a girl so involved in military affairs was unnatural. Others murmured that she overshadowed her brother. Yet every complaint was met with the same response from Queen Bakwa: let her be. Zazzau needs every kind of strength. When Queen Bakwa died, the kingdom mourned deeply. She had been a beloved leader, respected for her fairness and skill. Amina, grieving but determined, stood beside her brother as he took the throne as King Karama. The transition was peaceful, but while Karama handled diplomacy and governance, Amina sought a different path. She became the commander of the royal cavalry, a role rarely given to women. Under her leadership, the cavalry grew more disciplined, more strategic, and more fearsome. By her early 20s, Amina had already led successful raids against rival kingdoms, earning spoils of war, expanding territory, and gaining the unwavering loyalty of soldiers who had once doubted her. She fought on the front lines rather than from behind palace walls. Her sword knew the weight of real battle. Her horse carried her into danger with a trust and rhythm that seemed almost divine. There were nights when the flames of nearby campfires cast shadows on her armor, and soldiers would look at her silhouette and whisper that she was protected by spirits. Some said she was guided by ancestors, some feared her, others adored her, but all respected her. When King Karama died unexpectedly, some say from illness, others claim poisoning, the kingdom faced uncertainty once more. The nobles gathered to choose the next ruler. Traditionally, the throne should have passed to a male relative, but the counselors, the warriors, and the people all knew that in those turbulent times, Zazzau needed a leader who could defend the kingdom, command an army, secure trade routes, and stand fearlessly against threats from all sides. They needed Amina. She did not ask for the throne. She did not beg for support. She simply arrived at the council hall, wearing her battle armor, her sword at her side, and the quiet confidence of someone who had already proven what she could do. The nobles bowed. The council voted. The people cheered. And so Amina became Queen Amina of Zazzau, a woman who ruled not from the palace, but from the battlefield. Her coronation did not involve long speeches or extravagant rituals. According to legend, her only declaration was brief and powerful. I will make Zazzau the strongest kingdom in all Hausa land. And she meant every word. From the beginning of her reign, Amina focused on expanding Zazzau's influence across West Africa. But she did it through strategy, not chaos. She built alliances with some states, intimidated others, and crushed those who resisted. She reinforced the military, increasing the cavalry units and adding experienced warriors from various regions. She improved trade routes and expanded Zazzau's control over essential marketplaces, leatherworks, metal production, and most importantly, horses. Under her rule, Zazzau became a force that demanded attention. But Amina did not simply defend her borders. No, she wanted more. She envisioned a vast empire stretching across the Sahel, controlling trade from the Sahara to the forests of the south. She wanted Zazzau to become the beating heart of West African commerce and military power. And to do that, she needed to secure territory. Amina led her armies personally. She rode at the front, her armor glinting under the sun, her spear raised with purpose. She was known for launching rapid cavalry raids that took enemies by surprise. Her soldiers knew her battle cry. Her enemies feared her war drums. City after city fell. Zazzau's borders expanded, swallowing towns, farmlands, and trade routes. Amina often spent months away from the capital, living in military camps, strategizing with her generals, and adapting to shifting political landscapes. She earned immense wealth, horses, gold, slaves, and goods, all funneled back into strengthening the kingdom. But her most famous achievement, the one history would never forget, was the building of the Amina Walls. These immense defensive walls surrounded cities she conquered, marking her presence and securing Zazzau's influence. Many of these walls, or their ruins, still exist today across northern Nigeria. Historians call them the Ganuwar Amina. They became symbols of strength, unity, and strategic brilliance. Yet despite her power, Amina lived a life of solitude. She never married. She was said to have taken lovers during her campaigns, warriors, leaders, sometimes princes, but never allowed anyone to share her throne. Some storytellers claim she executed each lover the morning after to avoid political complications. Whether this is truth or myth remains unclear, but what is certain is that no man lived long enough to claim ownership over her destiny. For 34 years, Queen Amina ruled with an iron will and a strategic mind. Under her leadership, Zazzau became one of the most influential powers in the region. Trade flourished. Military strength soared. Cities grew. Her name became a warning to enemies and a source of pride for her people. But her rise was not without consequences. Enemies grew resentful. Some allied against her. Rival kingdoms plotted her downfall. And within Zazzau, not everyone loved her expansionist ambitions. Some believed she stretched the kingdom too thin. Others feared that her constant warfare attracted too many enemies. Still, Amina pressed on. Her desire for a unified, powerful Hausa empire was unshakable. And as her reputation spread, so too did the legends. They said she could see battles before they happened, that she never missed an arrow shot, that she slept in armor, that even the spirits of the land respected her. But the truth, the real truth, was simpler and yet more extraordinary. Amina was a leader who understood power, strategy, and discipline better than most rulers of her time. She was human, but she moved through history like a storm that reshaped landscapes, toppled empires, and carved her name into the foundation of West African history. As the decades passed, Amina grew older, but her fire refused to dim. She had conquered more cities than any Hausa ruler before her. She had built fortifications that stood the test of centuries. She had raised armies that could march for days without rest. She had inspired countless young girls to dream beyond the limitations society tried to impose. But even storms eventually meet mountains. Rumors began to spread of a rising coalition of enemy states, powerful kingdoms that had grown weary of Amina's unstoppable expansion. They were preparing to fight back. They wanted to reclaim their land, their pride, and their sense of security, and they believed the time had come to confront the queen who had overshadowed them for decades. Amina, aware of the threat, began to plan one final decisive campaign. It would be the greatest military challenge of her life, a war that would test her legacy, her armies, and her unbreakable will. Little did she know, it would also be her last. The rains had just ended when Queen Amina sensed that the world around her was beginning to shift. Zazzau's banners still flew proudly over the Hausa plains, and her warriors still trained with the same discipline that had carried her through a lifetime of conquest. But something deeper, quieter, moved beneath the surface, like the rumbling of distant thunder beneath a clear sky. It was the feeling a hunter gets when the forest goes silent. A sign, a warning. She stood on the balcony of her palace at dusk, watching the last orange streak melt into purple. The walls surrounding the city, Amina's walls, the barriers she'd built across the lands she had conquered, glowed in the fading light. She remembered the first wall she built around Zazzau itself, stone by stone, fueled by determination and a need for security. She remembered riding through the night with her cavalry, hearing the pounding of hundreds of hooves following her. She remembered the chants her soldiers raised each time she emerged atop her warhorse, spear poised above her head like a flame, but time had begun to whisper in her ear. The fire of youth had dimmed into embers, not gone, but slower to rise. That evening, her council gathered, and Amina listened quietly as her generals discussed new threats from the southern kingdoms. A rival confederation was rising, one that had been quietly absorbing smaller states while Zazzau was occupied in the west. For years, Amina had expanded her empire through sheer force, diplomacy, and unmatched military strategy. But now, a new alliance was forming, and they were not intimidated by stories of the warrior queen. They had their own ambitions. General Danladi, her most loyal commander since her earliest campaigns, looked at her with an expression he rarely wore concern. "My queen," he said gently, "we should fortify the borders. Let them come to us. For once, let us hold our ground." Amina's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in deep thought. "I have never waited for danger to reach my doorstep," she replied quietly. "I meet it on the road." Her council fell silent. They knew the decision was made. Amina would ride again. In the days that followed, the capital shifted into the familiar rhythm of war preparation. Blacksmiths hammered steel until sparks lit up the night. Horses were fed, groomed, and tested. Drummers practiced battle rhythms that had once made entire cities tremble. Amina walked among her soldiers, as she always did, her presence alone a kind of blessing. The young warriors straightened when they saw her, their faces glowing with awe. She was a legend even to those who had not witnessed her greatest victories. She was the woman who made kingdoms bow, who built walls across nations, who rode at the front, not the back of her army. But beneath the admiration was something else, a whisper. "She is older now. Has the great queen lost her edge? Can she still fight like she once did?" Amina heard it, though no one dared speak it loud. She ignored it. On the morning they departed, the city gathered to see them off. Mothers held infants high so they could one day say they saw Amina on her final campaign. Elders bowed their heads as the queen passed. Young girls watched her with wide eyes, seeing in her the impossible, a woman who commanded men, nations, and fate itself. Amina mounted her horse, a towering chestnut stallion named Zaki. She touched its mane softly before raising her spear high. "Zazzau," she shouted, and thousands of voices boomed back in unison. "Zazzau." The army rode out in a cloud of dust. The journey south was long and tense. Scouts returned with reports of abandoned villages, places the rival confederation had cleared out ahead of her arrival. Defensive positions, silent warnings. The enemy was prepared. One night, as the moon hung full and bright, Amina walked alone beyond the campfire circle. The wind carried the scent of distant rain and rustling grass. She closed her eyes and listened, the way she had been taught as a young girl by her mother Queen Bakwa Taranku. "Before you command warriors, learn to command silence," her mother once said. "Before you lead others, learn to lead the storm inside you." Amina had spent her entire life mastering storms. Tonight, the storm felt heavier. At dawn, the scouts came breathless with urgent news. "The enemy is not in the south. They've moved west. They are marching toward one of our border cities." It was a diversion, a trap, and Amina knew it instantly. Her general suggested splitting the army, sending half east, half west. Amina refused. "We ride together," she said. "We do not scatter like frightened birds." They marched west. The battle that followed was unlike any Amina had fought. Her enemies were not inexperienced armies of small kingdoms. They were disciplined, united, and determined to test the legend of the warrior queen firsthand. The clash erupted at dusk. The plains exploded with the sounds of steel and screams. Amina led the first charge, spear raised high, her horse leaping into the fray like a creature made of thunder. Her soldiers followed with a roar that shook the earth. They fought for hours. Amina cut through the enemy ranks with the precision of someone who had spent a lifetime in battle. But even she could feel the strain. Her muscles burned. Her breaths came heavier. She had endured wounds before, but tonight every scratch stung deeper. Still, she pushed. But the enemy had studied her tactics. They expected her to lead from the front, and they planned around it. As the moon climbed higher, a hidden unit of enemy archers emerged from the shadows, forming a semicircle around the center of the battlefield. They waited until Amina charged again, then fired all at once. Arrows darkened the sky. Danladi saw it first. "My queen!" he shouted, driving his horse forward. He shielded her with his own body, taking 3 arrows to the chest before collapsing at her feet. Amina screamed, not in fear, but in fury. She lifted him into her arms as arrows continued falling around them. "Go, my queen," Danladi gasped, blood pooling beneath him. "Zazzau needs you." Amina held him as life slipped from his eyes. "I will not forget," she whispered. But grief cost her precious seconds. The enemy surged. Her cavalry rushed in to protect her, fighting with the ferocity of lions. But the battlefield was turning. The enemy intended not just to defeat Amina, but to end her entirely. Her legend was too powerful. As long as she lived, resistance would grow. Amina's horse staggered under the weight of growing attacks. An arrow lodged in its flank, and it reared in agony. She fell, rolling across the dirt as warriors swarmed around her. But even on the ground, Amina fought like a storm unleashed. She broke a spear over one attacker's knee, drove the broken shaft into another's throat, and kicked a third in the chest. Her strength was fading, but her spirit burned like fire. Her soldiers formed a circle around her, trying to hold the line, but the enemy pressed harder. Amina looked around as if seeing the world with new clarity. She realized what she had always refused to admit. This battle wasn't about land. It wasn't about power. It was about ending a symbol. She was the symbol. And as long as she stood, they would never stop. Amina gave a fierce cry, lifted her blood-streaked spear, and charged one last time. For a moment, just a moment, her enemies hesitated. Even exhausted, even wounded, she radiated power. She was Amina, the woman who had ruled kingdoms, built walls, and bent empires to her will. But exhaustion is a slow assassin. Her spear wavered, her vision blurred. A blade slashed across her side. She stumbled, then fell to one knee. A young enemy soldier, no older than 17, stood before her, trembling. His sword was raised, but he hesitated. He had heard the stories since childhood. Killing her felt like striking down a goddess. Amina met his eyes. "Do not fear legends," she said softly. "We all return to the earth." She closed her eyes. The boy lowered his blade. But another warrior, older, hardened, did not hesitate. He struck swiftly, ending the legend with a single blow. Amina fell forward, the dust rising gently around her as the battlefield fell silent. Even the enemy paused, unsure whether to cheer or kneel. For a moment, time itself seemed to bow. When word reached Zazzau, the city wailed. Mothers tore their garments. Warriors pounded their chests in mourning. Elders wept openly in the streets. The queen who had shaped nations, who had led armies farther than any ruler before her, who had lived and fought without fear, was gone. Her body was carried home under the cover of night by her surviving soldiers. They buried her in a secret place, far from enemies who might try to defile her grave. Some said she was laid to rest in a cave high in the hills. Others whispered she was buried beneath one of her great walls. No one alive knows for certain, but something remarkable happened in the days that followed. Across the House of Lands, fires were lit in her honor. Entire villages gathered to sing songs about her bravery. Children pretended to ride horses, shouting her war cry. Women held their heads higher, speaking her name with pride. Even her enemies paused, acknowledging that they had not slain a mere ruler, they had slain history itself. With her passing, the expansion of Zazzau slowed. The empire she built remained strong for generations, but none could match her ferocity or her vision. Her walls stood long after her bones returned to dust. Some still stand today. Her name echoed through centuries, not just as a queen, but as a force. Amina of Zazzau became more than a person. She became a myth, a memory carved into the spine of West Africa, proof that a woman could shape the world with her bare hands. And though empires rise and fall, legends do not die. They wait whispered from mother to daughter, from elder to child alive. As long as someone remembers, Amina is still remembered. She always will be.